אחר צהריים טובים. אנחנו בחלק האחרון של כנס החלל התשיעי על שם אילן רמון. היו יומיים ארוכים ומרתקים. בטוח שחלק מכם שיושב כאן והיה ביומיים המלאים יודע להעריך את המגוון הרחב של הנושאים. המושב האחרון יוקדש לפעילות של בני אדם בחלל. זה מושב די מיוחד בכנס, לא עשינו משהו בסגנון הזה, ואני קודם כל רוצה להציג את הדוברים במושב. הדובר הראשון יהיה אסטרונאוט מסוכנות החלל האירופית, תומאס רייטר. תכף אנחנו נרחיב קצת את הדברים כשנבקש ממנו לעלות לבמה. תומאס רייטר כיום הוא ראש מרכז האסטרונאוטים של אירופה. דובר נוסף במושב הוא קוסמונאוט. הקוסמונאוט הרומני הראשון שטס עם ברית המועצות לחלל. הקוסמונאוט דומיטרו דורין פרונריו. ויש לנו גם אסטרונאוטית במושב הזה. האסטרונאוטית אנה פישר, רופאה, אז אם מישהו מרגיש לא טוב, אבל ההתמחות שלה כמובן היא גם בנושאים אחרים. האסטרונאוטית שטסה במעבורת החלל האמריקאי. כל אחד מהמשתתפים במושב יעלה ויציג את המצגת שלו, ומאוחר יותר אנחנו נשב קצת על הבמה, ויהיה זמן לשאלות, תשובות, ולדיון כלשהו בנושא פעילות האדם בחלל, ויש לשלושת המשתתפים ביחד ניסיון חיים מאוד מאוד מעניין, והרבה מאוד זמן שיהיה מצטבר בחלל. הראשון שאני אבקש לעלות ולהציג הוא האסטרונאוט תומאס רייטר, הוא ראש תחום הפעילות האנושית בחלל של סוכנות החלל האירופית, הוא טייס קרב בעברו בחיל האוויר הגרמני, הטיס מגוון של מטוסים, פיקד על טייסת מבצעית של מטוסי טורנדו, בוגר מספר מסגרות חינוך גבוה, כולל האוניברסיטה של הצבא הגרמני, שם קיבל תואר בנושא של הנדסת אווירונאוטיקה וחלל. לתומאס רייטר יש, כמו שאתם רואים, ניסיון מאוד מגוון, ואם הוא היה צריך לבוא עם כל התגים, אז כבר לא היה מקום. הוא טס לחלל 3 פעמים, בחלליות שונות, יש לו ניסיון בטיסת חלל עם טכנולוגיה רוסית, הוא היה בתחנת החלל מיר, ובתחנת החלל הבינלאומית, במעבורת החלל, וביצע מספר פעמים ריחופים בחלל למטרות שונות. So I'm very honored to ask astronaut Thomas Reiter to take this stand.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's really a great pleasure for me to be with you this afternoon and give to you a little insight into ESA's exploration plans. For me, it's the first time that I'm attending this conference. I could be here the whole day. I have to say it was really very interesting, inspiring presentations. And now I would like to let you know a little bit more about the European Space Agency and what our plans are in the future in the area of human spaceflight and exploration. Allow me to start with a few words about ESA, then talk about what are our strategic exploration destinations, our involvement in the International Space Station, in the automated transfer vehicle. You might recall last year an ATV flew to the station. It was called Albert Einstein, and this was linked to a live transmission from one of my colleagues, Luca Parmetano, here to the university. And then for the future, we are participating with our international partner, with NASA, in the preparation for the next steps in the context of the MPCV ESM, that stands for Multipurpose Crew Vehicle, and ESM stands for European Service Module. and then the steps beyond. Now, I don't think I need to say too much about ESA. A lot has been already mentioned this afternoon. This morning, the Director General of the Israel Space Agency has already addressed the cooperation that takes place with ESA. Very interesting activity in the area of electric propulsion. And also you heard this afternoon from Mr. Thanasis Postos that there is quite an intense European cooperation. You can see in total 20 member states, 18 are also at the same time member states of the European Union, and 2, Norway and Switzerland, are member states of ESA. And I have to say the family is growing. So with that, and of course across the Atlantic we have Canada as a cooperating partner, so really a big family once again which is growing. Before I come to exploration, allow me a few words on what else is going on in ESA and specifically in my directorate, which is called Human Spaceflight and Operations. So what you see here is the European Space Operations Center in Darmstadt. That is where I'm actually located. ESOC is doing all ESA missions, interplanetary ESA missions, science missions, Earth observating missions. And in the last 50 years, actually this year we are celebrating 50 years of ESA. We had a lot of great successes. Very recently, the wake up of a satellite which is on its way to a comet, to Churyumov-Gerasimenko. The mission is called Rosetta, but I will say a few words about that afterwards. Of course, if you are doing spaceflight, you need to be able also to control satellites, to control all those vehicles that are flying around the Earth orbit, which are flying around our neighboring planets like Mars, like Venus, and which are going in the depths of space. And this expertise in Europe is located at the European Space Operations Center in Darmstadt. You need quite a lot of ground stations in order to send commands to all these satellites. Here you see an overview. The blue dots are the ESA stations, but of course here you see how well international cooperation works. The other colored dots are ground stations from our partners in order to always have contact to those satellites, to the space station and so forth. These stations are used, and specifically we are using for our exploration missions, which are now flying around Mars, Venus, which are in the Lagrange point, Earth, Sun, Lagrange point L2, Gaia. We heard a lot about that this morning. You need these big antennas, 3 of them we have with ESA in Australia, in Cebrero, Spain, and Argentina. So if you look on the globe, they are about separated by 120 degrees of longitude. So as the Earth turns, that each of those antennas always can have contact with the satellites that are on their way in the depth of space. Now with that, let me come to the topic of exploration. Now, what is ESA's approach? In the area of human spaceflight, we have, of course, strategic interests which are really realized basically through the cooperation in the ISS program with our international partners. It's 50 nations who are participating in the ISS programs, 5 space agencies, NASA, Roscosmos, JAXA, CSA from Canada, and ESA. And of course, ESA does not have own transportation capabilities in human spaceflight. We have launchers, as you could see this morning, but in the area of human space transportation, we are relying on our partners from Russia and from the United States. It helps us to build up unique European capabilities and further advance them in the area of transportation, operation, and also in niche technologies. For example, in life support systems. You can imagine if you are sending humans into space and in future as the ultimate goal, maybe in 2 decades, maybe 3-4 decades, the ultimate goal is to send humans to our neighboring planet Mars. You need these kind of systems in order to sustain life over a long time. We are a partner for human exploration, and of course at the moment we are discussing to bring the program to 2020, to the end of this decade, but already this discussion is started. Okay, and what will then happen after 2020 with ISS, with our participation? Also, we are involved in robotic exploration, and this is not mutually exclusive. Robots and humans can work very well together, and I'm sure you will see a lot of examples when Anna makes her presentations, how well actually humans and robots are working together. And this is a good example of integrating human and robotic activities. Now, what are the strategic destinations for the European Space Agency? Our Director General has put forward basically 3 of those destinations, which is low Earth orbit, via our participation in the ISS program. Secondly, the Moon, and here we are in a study phase. We are looking for a cooperative mission with Russia, but that still needs to be decided by our member states. And Mars. Mars, there is a program running called ExoMars, consisting of 2 missions. The first one is supposed to launch in 2016, and the next one in 2018. And then there is an aspect of transportation which comes out of this cooperation with NASA, but I will come into the detail a little bit later. So with this programmatic lines, the 3 strategic destinations, low Earth orbit, Moon and Mars, let me say a few words about the European contribution to the International Space Station. We have up there, you see here a picture which is already a little bit older. This is a picture from one of the last flights of the US shuttle. Myself, I had the chance 2006 to fly to the International Space Station on board the shuttle and also return, so that was a fantastic experience. So we have a module up there, the Columbus module, which offers a wide range of scientific possibilities for research. You see here on the lower part, let's see if I find the laser pointer. No, okay, let me get the pointer. Ah, here it is. So this is the supply vehicle, the ATV, but beyond that we have contributed quite a lot to the International Space Station, so-called multi-purpose logistics module, a module which was produced in Italy and is now stationed on board ISS. We have participated in the construction of 2 of the nodes, the cupola, which is a beautiful window that allows you to have a fantastic, overwhelming view of our planet. Payloads on all sides of the station, European robotic arm, and the central computer for the Russian segment. Now, a few more words about the Columbus Laboratory. That was launched in February 2008. You see here one of my colleagues from the European Astronaut Corps, Hans Schlegel, who was involved in the installation, and a French colleague, Leopold Eyharts, who was together up there with Hans and the crew to establish Columbus, get all systems running, and start with the scientific work. Already before Columbus was brought up, we had extensive scientific programs. To date, ESA has performed more than 200 different experiments on board the International Space Station, and that gives a wide possibility of applications. You see here the range of those research topics. They are in general ranging from fundamental research. You see on the upper part molecular biology, gravitational biology, combustion, more application-related research like material sciences, and aspects like fundamental physics, Earth observation, biotechnology. Just a little bit before, you heard a very, very interesting presentation of Mr. Janin from Space Pharma. I think that was a good example how microgravity can help to develop new products and to understand mechanisms that are going on in our body in order to fight diseases like osteoporosis, like deficiencies in our cardiopulmonary system, in our vestibular system, immune system deficiencies. And in order to understand those mechanisms better, we are doing these investigations in microgravity, and that helps to fight, for example, these diseases, to understand them better before you can, of course, fight them. You need to have a very thorough understanding. And there are a lot of possibilities in the future really to use this fantastic platform for research. Now, I mentioned already the flight of Luca Parmetano and the live call he did last year while he was on orbit. This year we have actually 2 colleagues who are getting ready to fly with their colleagues from NASA, from Roscosmos on JAXA. One of my German colleagues, Alexander Gerst, who will launch in May this year, stay for half a year, and then in November he will come back. And the next one is Samantha Cristoforetti, who will basically hand over then, from a European perspective, take over from Alexander and be up on board the station till May 2015. Then we will see a short-term flight of Danish colleague, Andreas Mogensen, and then end of 2015, one of our British ESA astronauts, Timothy Peake, will go up, and I believe end of 2016, beginning of 2017, there is one more slot which still needs to be assigned to, and we have still one of our colleagues waiting for a flight, and that I'm pretty sure will work very well, and when our Director General then decides, it will be his chance. Now a few words to the transportation vehicle. I mentioned already ATV, and I think this morning it was taken reference by the Director General of the Israel Space Agency. Here you see a comparison of this vehicle. The ATV on the left side, the Russian Progress, which supplies the International Space Station basically every 3 months. And on the right side, you see the famous Apollo capsule. That gives you an idea about the sizes. ATV has a height of about 10 meters, a diameter of 4.6 meters. And what you see here has a launch mass of 20 tons. Of these 20 tons, about 7.5 tons are payload. Part of the payload is located here in this integrated cargo carrier. So as the ATV docks to the Russian segment of the station, the astronauts can come in here and then get out the pressurized payload. And we are also bringing up fuel to refuel the Russian segment, water, atmosphere, like oxygen, nitrogen, or air that is brought up to the station, and we are giving propulsive support. Because the station needs to be pushed every once in a while to remain in its orbit between 350 and 400 kilometers. So there is a residual atmosphere in this altitude, but you need to push it and accelerate it every few months in order that it stays in this altitude, and ATV is giving this support as the other vehicles. Now what I want to show you is a little video clip. I'm sure you have all seen launches from satellites. But this is a very unique view. It was from ATV-4, and you see here the launcher, the view back to the launcher. You see here the first stage of the Ariane 5, which is just separating from the upper stage. In a moment, it will gain some distance from the upper stage, will be passivated, and then this lower booster enters in the atmosphere and burns up. And then the second stage is ignited, is bringing ATV into the orbit, and here you see now the view forward. You see the view to the ATV, which is just about to separate, and after this separation it takes about 5 days to get synchronized with the orbit of the International Space Station, and then it automatically docks to the station. And you can imagine that the crew on orbit is always very, very happy to see such a vehicle approaching, because apart from spare parts and supply parts, there are always some letters from the family, some nice little presents, and of course some food, which is always good to have when you are on orbit. Now the question is, how do we get to 2020 and what happens beyond? This is currently discussed in the European Space Agency with our member states. Of course, the investments that were made by our member states, from the 20 member states, 11 are participating in this program. Of course, their interest is to have a return of investment in the form of scientific knowledge, which is produced in the scientific operation on orbit. So we need to still secure funding till 2020. We have a ministerial conference coming up in the end of this year. And of course, then is the question, what happens after 2020? Beginning of this month, the US government has announced that the US side, NASA, will extend ISS at least till 2024. So I think this is a very good news for us, because that helps us to take our decision how to get to 2020 and then how to go beyond. In general, as part of this cooperation, we can say we have an astronaut, part of the ISS crew, about once every 2 years. Well, in this year it's a little bit more often, so this is a good development. But of course, then for the rest of the decade, it will not be as often as I just showed you. Now, what is the future? Unfortunately, this year we will launch the last ATV, ATV5. This is currently in the preparation in French Guiana, getting prepared for a launch in June to be flying to the International Space Station and then re-entering into the atmosphere, and it burns up end of this year. Now you can imagine the development of such a system has required a lot of work, a lot of engineers were working, a lot of knowledge and expertise was acquired, and it would be really a pity if after 5 such excellent missions, this would be just lost. So we had the possibility 2 years ago to start again a cooperation with NASA, building upon the experience of the ATV, the so-called service module. This is the rear part of the ATV, and that allows us now to develop a so-called service module for the next generation human-rated space transportation system, MPCV, or Orion. You see here, this is the Orion capsule, and this lower part here, this will be provided for the maiden flight and for the second flight based on ATV technology. And with this transportation system, it will be possible for humans to go beyond low Earth orbit. There are various mission scenarios discussed now from NASA, and I'm sure Anna will say a few more details about that. For Europe, for ESA, it is very important that we have the perspective of using ISS, of flying our astronauts to ISS, of doing experiments in microgravity, but also to have the perspective to participate in human exploration that is going beyond low Earth orbit, and the destinations might be an asteroid. This is one of the programs that are currently discussed in the United States. The ultimate goal I mentioned before is Mars, and therefore this is a very, very important step and allows us to build upon the experience before. We don't forget the moon. I think the moon as our neighbor is still a very, very attractive destination. And if you think about what has happened in the last months with the landing of the Chang'e 3, or the mission Chang'e 3, the Chinese mission, and the landing of the rover on the surface of the moon, you can imagine this destination is still in the focus not only of the European Space Agency, but of many other space agencies, at least from China and from Russia. So we are currently working on a preparation of a cooperation in the context of the so-called Lunar Resource Mission. You see this Lunar Resource Mission here, 2017, is supposed to land on the moon, and there are 2 technologies that have been developed in Europe in the last years. One for precise optical navigation, so that you designate a landing site and precisely hit this coordinate when you are going down. And the second point is obstacle avoidance. Of course, there's always a risk on a surface like the moon, which is not even, not plane, that there are rocks around, and of course you want to avoid that your lander is tipping over by having one landing leg on a big rock or so. So these 2 technologies is something we are bringing into this cooperation, and of course there are a lot of scientific interests. The next step would be to do a lunar polar sample return. There is a high likelihood that in the polar regions of the moon there is water ice, and that would be, of course, a good prerequisite to have maybe in a far future a permanently manned lunar station, but that needs to be seen. This will be done in international cooperation. Now, I'm almost at the end. You see here the different paths using low Earth orbit in the upper side with the International Space Station, then lunar exploration, robotic at the moment, exploration of Mars with robotic missions, but today we are preparing already the way for humans to go beyond low Earth orbit, and ESA has in its programs taken the adequate steps. And with that, I'm almost done. Relevance to societies, of course, exploration needs to be done in big cooperative context. It increases our knowledge of our neighboring celestial bodies. It generates innovation, tangible benefits by new technologies and processes, and to build competitive capabilities of industry. And of course, in education, I have to say I was 11 years old when Neil Armstrong was and Buzz Aldrin were landing on the moon, and I was fascinated. And that was the moment when I thought, Jesus, that would be fantastic to become an astronaut, to study aerospace engineering, and I think the same would be true for the future. So with that, I'm at the end. This picture, by the way, is a picture taken from Rosetta, the mission I was mentioning before. Rosetta is closing up to this comet, Churyumov-Gerasimenko. It was in 1.5 years of hibernation, and it woke up just a few days ago at a distance of 800 million kilometers. And we received the signal, I can tell you, I mean, sitting in the shuttle or in a Soyuz rocket and waiting to be launched is quite something, but sitting there and waiting for the signal is also a little bit of stress. So fortunately, everything went fine. This probe will close up now to this comet as it's heading towards the sun. It will meet the comet about in the summertime, and then in November we will see a landing of this probe on the surface of this comet, and that again helps the scientists to determine a little bit about the history of our solar system. Fundamental questions like the water that we have on our planet, is it coming from where? Maybe from such comets which hit the Earth and brought the water, and it might be that this was also a step to bring certain building stones for the existence of life here, like amino acids. Those are scientific questions that will be answered with these missions. So thank you very much, and all the best to you.
תודה רבה לגנרל, בריגדיר גנרל, כן, תומאס רייטר. הדובר הבא, קוסמונאוט, שמייצג מדינה שלא שולחת באופן תדיר ושגרתי אנשים לחלל, קוסמונאוט רומני, שטס במסגרת תוכנית משותפת לברית המועצות ולמדינות אחרות, שנקראה אינטרקוסמוס, והטיסה שלו, שנמשכה, כפי שאתם רואים, צריך לדייק, 7 ימים, 20 שעות ו-42 דקות, הייתה באמצעות חללית רוסית מסוג סיוז. גנרל מיור דומיטרו דורין פרונריו היה מהנדס בחיל האוויר הרומני, עם קריירה מאוד עשירה ומגוונת, נבחר כקוסמונאוט מקרב מספר מועמדים. לאחר הטיסה שלו קיבל את 2 העיטורים הגבוהים ביותר של ברית המועצות ורומניה, גיבור ברית המועצות והעיטור של גיבור רומניה. מה שמעניין, ועוד נשמע ממנו קצת, גם עכשיו וגם מאוחר יותר בשיחה, הוא הקים גם את ההתאחדות או האגודה של חוקרי החלל, שצריך רק פרט אחד קטן כדי להתקבל אליה, והוא לטוס לחלל. So, Dumitru, please.
Good afternoon. I don't know exactly what Tal said about me because I don't understand Hebrew, but I'm sure only good things. Thank you, Tal. First, I want to thank the Ministry of Science, Technology and Space for inviting me here, together with the Fisher Institute and with the Israeli Space Agency. With the Israeli Space Agency, we have longer cooperation in the framework of the UN, and I'm sure we'll find some other ways of getting together and cooperating. Me, Thomas, Anna, have different presentations. If Thomas introduced you to European programs to manage space flight, I will introduce to a period much earlier than this one. I introduce you to a history of the space flights in Eastern Europe, including Romania. Well, I hope. First, I want to say a few words about the organization of my space flight. Since 1968, Romania took part in the Intercosmos program, a program mostly for Eastern European countries promoted with the goal of developing national space research capabilities, experts and researchers training, launch scientific experiments into outer space, eventually cosmonauts, using the infrastructure of the former Soviet Union. The Intercosmos International Manned Space Program started in 1976, and the first 3 space flights took place in 1978. You have here the image of the first non-Russian, non-American cosmonauts that flew into space: Vladimir Remek from the former Czechoslovakia, Miroslav Hermaszewski from Poland, and Zygmunt Yen, then from Eastern Germany. In 1977, at the age of 25, I voluntarily offered for spaceflight training as a young airspace engineer. After a tough selection process, I was one of the 2 Romanian specialists proposed to accomplish a full 3 years training program in Star City near Moscow. Before leaving Romania, I was proposed to become an active Air Force officer, and I agreed. I may say that for me, the toughest challenge in the beginning of my training was to learn Russian. In the school, I learned French and German. After the training period, together with the Russian Leonid Popov, we were selected as the first international Soviet-Romanian crew and launched on 14 May 1981 into outer space for an 8-day spaceflight. On board Soyuz 40, 28 hours after the launch, accomplishing during this time 2 orbital maneuvers, we docked with Salyut 6 space station. Together with the main crew, Vladimir Kovalyonok and Victor Savinuch, worked together for the next 7 days to accomplish a full scientific program, main part of which was proposed by the Romanian specialists. Such way, we completed 22 scientific experiments in the fields of astrophysics, space radiation, space technologies, space medicine, and biology. In 22 May 1981, we undocked from the space station, re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, and landed safely in Kazakhstan. You wonder maybe what cosmonauts do after the space flight. So I have my own experience, and I want to share you a little bit of this, just to know what you can do if you will fly into space, what you can do for Israel, and what you can do for the international community. I'm one of the founding members of the Association of Space Explorers. It was founded in 1985. Since 2010, I served as president of the AEC Europe, and since 2011 of all Association of Space Explorers. Since 2005, I'm also a member of the association's Committee on Near-Earth Objects. I was elected chairman of the United Nations Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, UN COPUOS, for the period of June 2010, June 2012. I mentioned that I worked with this committee, formed from 71 member states and more than 30 international organizations, since 1992 as representative of Romania. Since 2004 to 2006, I chaired the Scientific and Technical Subcommittee of the same corpus. Since 1995, I'm also acting as a Vice President of the European Institute for Risk, Security and Communication Management, EURISC, from Bucharest. We have close ties with a lot of international such associations, from China to the United States, from north to south. Since 1998 till 2004, I was the president of the Romanian Space Agency. During that time, we signed agreements and developed several projects with ESA, and signed the first agreement of the government of Romania with NASA. Since 2004, I was for almost 2 years the itinerary ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary of Romania to the Russian Federation. I'm a full member and member of the Board of Trustees of the International Academy of Astronautics since 2011. I'm also a honorary member of the Romanian Academy. In 2012, I was appointed and worked for 1 year as one of the 15 experts of the group of governmental experts on outer space transparency and confidence-building measures established by the UN General Assembly Resolution 65/68. I earned a degree in aerospace engineering from the University Polytechnic of Bucharest and a PhD in the field of spaceflight dynamics. From several years, I'm a retired Air Force Major General. Currently, I'm working for the Romanian Space Agency as the president of the Romanian Association for Space Technology and Industry, RomSpace. One of the main and dear activities for me is as a member of the Association of Space Explorers. The Association of Space Explorers is an international non-profit professional and educational organization of now 395 astronauts and cosmonauts from 36 nations. AAC was founded in 1985 in Cernay, France, by a small group of US, Russian, and international flyers. AAC's mission is to provide a forum from professional dialogue among individuals who have flown into space, to support space science and exploration for the benefit of all, to promote and support education in science, technology, engineering and mathematics, STEM, to foster environmental awareness and planetary stewardship, and to encourage international cooperation in the human exploration of space. The main event of our association is the AAC Planetary Congress. Held in a different host country each year, it has a long history as the premier forum for astronauts and cosmonauts from all spacefaring nations to meet and exchange information about their respective space agencies, human spaceflight operations, and future plans for exploration beyond low Earth orbit. The week-long Congress affords a unique opportunity for communication between members of the international space community, government agencies, and the public. A few words and considerations about the decision taken within our association during the 26th Planetary Congress last July in Germany. Each space flight involves an assumed risk for astronauts, sometimes leading to their ultimate sacrifice. Israel is the country whose first space hero, Ilan Ramon, 11 years ago, after 16 days of successful spaceflight, was killed together with his 6 crewmates during the disastrous re-entry into the atmosphere and disintegration of the Columbia shuttle. After a change of letters with Ms. Rona Ramon, the founder of the Ramon Foundation, I proposed to my fellows from the Association of Space Explorers to consider Ilan Ramon the first posthumous accepted member of our association. After several debates, we voted and unanimously agreed on this proposal. Now we consider Israel as the 36th nation having a member in the only in the world non-governmental professional and educational association of astronauts and cosmonauts, the Association of Space Explorers. Thank you. Throughout the year, activities of the Association of Space Explorers comprise the AAC Near Earth Objects Committee, which promotes inter-space agency planning for near Earth objects deflection and it's active in United Nations discussions aimed at a decision-making agreement to deal with hazardous objects. The ASC challenges launching imaginations, which helps us reach out and inspire the next generation of scientists, astronauts, and space explorers. The astronaut perspective, by visiting schools and speaking to young students, can make a world of difference. The Guardians of Earth, where the association partners with several Russian space institutions and hopes to provide travel stipends for deserving students from the 36 AAC member nations who may not otherwise be able to afford to travel to Star City, Russia. The Association of Space Explorers Scholarship Fund. Here, the association seeks to stimulate interest in science and mathematics and inspire in students a lifelong commitment to education. The AAC General Scholarship Fund supports students and young professionals pursuing careers in the space sciences, engineering, or space business administration. The International Space University Fellowship, it's an AAC scholarship specifically intended to support young space professionals or students who have been accepted to the International Space University. The first AAC ISU Fellowship was awarded at the 26th Planetary Congress in 2013. Last year, we have signed a scholarship with the University of Alabama, Huntsville, and have in work a scholarship with the Washington State University. Our project, Windows on Earth, it's a software tool developed to support astronauts and cosmonauts' photography of the Earth from space. It will be launched to the ISS this July. In the same time, Windows on Earth, it's a web-delivered content using astronaut Earth photography to support citizen science program, planetary stewardship, and environmental education. I would like to remind the distinguished audience that last June, we celebrated 50 years from the first woman in space, Valentina Vladimirovna Tereshkova. At the UN in Vienna, with the involvement of the Association of Space Explorers, it was organized a special session of the United Nations Committee on the Peaceful Use of Outer Space dedicated to outstanding women in space activities. From almost 15 years, men and women, astronauts and cosmonauts from many nations were together on board the International Space Station, opening new doors to international cooperation for the peaceful purposes. Most of them are already members of the Association of Space Explorers. I want to wish the 38th expedition, which is now on board ISS, a successful flight and a soft landing. At its Planetary Congress, the Association of Space Explorers presents its Planetary Award, symbolized by the crystal helmet, to an individual who has made an outstanding contribution to the advancement and understanding of the theme subject of the year's Congress. The AAC also honors notables who have contributed greatly to the association and its aims by awarding those Leonov medallions. Leonov from Alexei Leonov, a well-known hero of the space. We deeply regret the tragedy of the Space Shuttle Columbia and the fact that Ilan Ramon himself couldn't bring his experience and contribution in the work of our association, but are delighted to have Ms. Rona Ramon and her Ilan Ramon Foundation next to us and initiate a future cooperation for the education and benefits of the future generation of space specialists. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dumitru. And I'm sure that this appearance at the Ilan Ramon Space Conference is your first among many to come. The next speaker, נדבר בעברית בעצם, הדוברת הבאה, אסטרונאוט אנה לי פישר מנאסא, היא אסטרונאוטית שנבחרה בקבוצה הראשונה של אסטרונאוטיות בארצות הברית ב-1978, וטסה לחלל במשימה אחת במעבורת החלל דיסקאברי. קיבלה הרבה מאוד הוקרות על פעילותה המדעית והאחרת בנאסא, בין היתר את אחד העיטורים הגבוהים של נאסא, נאסא Exceptional Service Medal, כבר ב-1999. היא טסה לחלל פעם אחת ולקחה חופשה של מספר שנים בין 1989 ל-1995 על מנת להקדיש זמן למשפחתה. היא הייתה האסטרונאוטית הראשונה שטסה לחלל כבר כאימא. היא עדיין אסטרונאוטית פעילה בנאסא, למרות שכרגע לא מתוכננת איזושהי טיסה קרובה. היא עובדת על הרבה מאוד מיזמים ופרויקטים, כולל תוכניות שקשורות בחללית המאוישת הבאה של ארצות הברית, אוריון. So, astronaut Anna Fisher, please take the stand. רק התנצלות מראש, כל כך הרבה הופעות, so many appearances, so she has a little problem with the voice, so we have a short film that she could rest during the presentation.
Thank you very much. Shalom. It's a real pleasure for me to be here to speak to you at this very distinguished Congress. I want to thank the Fisher Institute, the Israel Ministry of Science, Technology, and Space, the Israel Space Agency, and the Ramon Foundation for inviting me. I've had such a wonderful time. This is my first trip to Israel, and I've received so much wonderful hospitality, and I want to thank everyone for their kindness. And I apologize for my voice, and will do my best. I have some good news and some bad news. I'll give you the bad news first. The bad news is I have a lot of slides. The good news is they're all pictures. So hopefully you will enjoy my presentation. I'm going to talk a little bit about what it's like to be in space and use my mission as an example. And then I will also tell you a bit about what we're doing in the International Space Station and then where the U.S. space program is going. And I will have to also agree with my colleague Dimitru that the hardest thing I've had to do is try to learn Russian. I was very fortunate in 1978 to be selected in the first group of women that was selected for the U.S. space program. That was along with Kathy Sullivan, Ray Seddon, Shannon Lucid, Judy Resnick, myself, and Sally Ride, who was our first woman to fly in space, and the third woman overall. One of the most fun things that you do when you're assigned to a crew is to design your patch. And we flew as a crew of 5, but since I was the first mother in space, do you have the pointer? You'll see the 2 stars in the middle, and since I was designing it and we didn't really tell NASA about it, I added a star for my daughter as well. So you'll see there's 6 stars on our patch. As I said, we flew as a crew of 5. I flew before the Challenger accident, so we didn't wear the pressure suits that were not thought to be necessary that we added after the Challenger. I will say it's a lot more comfortable flying in a flight suit than the pressurized orange suits. Training for a shuttle mission is about a year, and then at about a week before your flight, you're put in quarantine, and in about 3 days before flight, you go to the Kennedy Space Center where we launched. This is Discovery on the launch pad the night before the launch. I use this slide every morning of the launch. Everyone gathers for breakfast, but you really try very hard not to eat or drink too much, because no matter how little you drink, when you lay out on the pad, on your back, with your legs in the air, if you can imagine your seat rotated to the ground, and you sit out there for at least 3 hours, if there's no delay, you're going to have to go to the bathroom. And everyone wears a diaper underneath their flight suits. Thank you. And you just press that. And if you can imagine, using a diaper when you've been trained all your life not to use a diaper, it takes a little bit of training and some practice. We launched on November 8th after a one-day delay. The entire space transportation, the entire space shuttle system launch is 7 million pounds of thrust at liftoff. Whoops, sorry about that. There are the three, whoops, excuse me. Very good. Well, skip it. There are the three main engines that receive the fuel from the large external tank and the two solid rocket boosters on either side. Now I'm going to try to show you a little video of what it's like for a shuttle launch. As I said, we launched on November 8th on one of my colleagues' birthdays. He promised not to blow out missions. The remainder of the ascent is very smooth with just a constant acceleration for the next 6.5 minutes. And in 8.5 minutes, you go from 0 miles per hour to 28,000 kilometers per hour in 8.5 minutes, which gives you some idea of how powerful the launch system is. I'm just going to very briefly show you what it's like to live on the orbit, because I also have a video that shows some of the same things. As you can see, the upper flight deck of the shuttle looks very much like a conventional jet cockpit. There are over 2,000 switches and circuit breakers on the flight deck. Here you see our commander, and the book in the middle, the crew activity plan, is your Bible when you're on orbit. It tells you what you're going to be doing every minute of every day that you're on orbit. And then this is the aft, or the back of the shuttle. The two seats that the two mission specialists sat in on the back are folded up. And then the panel on the left is where the commander can fly the orbiter on orbit. And on the right is the panel that I use to operate the robotic arm. We then have a mid-deck area, which is where we have all of our where we sleep, our lockers, our exercise equipment, and any experiments that we carried on board. As you can see, this is my locker. Everything was color-coded: red for the commander, yellow for the pilot, green for mission specialist 2, and you can see that I'm having a good case of zero-G hair. I'm going to talk about the food when I show you the video. Here you see Dr. Joe Allen, who's a physicist doing some studies on fluid dynamics. A little bit about sleeping in space. Sleeping, the first night, it's really strange when you get on orbit, at least for me. I can't speak for my colleagues, but I kept wanting a little more security than just floating free. So I kind of wedged myself between two sleeping bags on one of the walls of the shuttle. But this is on during the day of our last day on orbit, and I was taking a little nap. And as you can see, there's just a little tether that's holding me to the handrail of the treadmill, so that you don't float away. But it's so comfortable to just go to sleep. You can just fall asleep wherever you want, and you never know where you wake up if you don't tether yourself. One of the things people always want to know about is, how do you go to the bathroom in space? And my fast answer to that is very carefully. Here is our pilot, Dave Walker, who I hope is simulating use of the waste management system. The waste management system is very similar to the little porta potties that you see at festivals and in concerts and things like that. And then we use vacuum extraction to help things along. And I think I'll leave the rest to your imagination. The one thing that NASA added as we started flying mixed gender crews is this privacy curtain. But as you can see, you really don't have a lot of privacy. People kind of have an idea what you might be up to. I'm not going to talk about my flight because I have so much more to cover other than to say it was probably one of the most exciting missions in the early part of the space shuttle program. We were the first crew to actually bring hardware back from space. We launched 2 satellites, as was mentioned in the introduction, and we also recovered 2 satellites that were not intended to be recovered. They were good satellites, but they were in the wrong orbit, and the insurance industry really wanted this mission. It was the second largest salvage mission in Lloyd's of London history. And here you see what I consider a beautiful shot of one of the satellites that we rescued. You see Dale Gardner on your left with the manned maneuvering unit who's docked with the satellite, Dr. Joe Allen on the end of the arm, and I'm inside the shuttle operating the robotic arm. Now I'm going to show you a little video of some of the same things I talked about, but I think it's more interesting when you see it in a video. Here you see Dave Walker and in a second, my commander, Rick Hauk. They're on the flight day. This is on day 8 as we're doing our flight control checkout. Just before the shuttle gets ready to enter the Earth's atmosphere the next day, we do a thorough checkout of all of our sensors. And then here you see Dave leaving the flight deck and heading down to the mid-deck, although there is no down, but because of our 1G training, that's how we think of it. You see the ladder that we use to ingress and egress on the ground, but in orbit, it's really not necessary. One of the games we used to play is try to see who could start on the flight deck and go all the way down to these foot restraints and get the farthest without touching anything and landing in the foot restraints. Here you see the drawer, that's our tool drawer that for any repairs or things that we needed to do on orbit. You see the 2 sleep restraints and my locker that I showed you in the slide. And then this is the airlock. For later missions to build a space station, the airlock was moved out into the payload bay. But for our flight, it was inside and it took up a lot of the volume. And you see the spacesuits were stowed in there. And the airlock is the means by which the 2 crew members left the pressurized compartment to go out into the vacuum of space. There's always repairs that we need to do on orbit, and on the International Space Station, a lot of time is spent on maintenance in addition to the science. I thought I was going to get away from having to do any cleaning for a couple of weeks, but not so. All of the electronics on board the space shuttle was air-cooled, so we really needed to spend time cleaning filters, and our commander was very strict about it. But as you can see, it's much easier when you can float up to the ceiling. As I said, I was going to talk a bit about the food. The food on orbit is really good. It's mostly rehydratable. We also fly meats that are thermally stabilized. We had a food warmer, that little suitcase-looking thing, which, by the way, is being brought back to be used on our Orion vehicle that I'll mention in a few minutes. Because later on, they got a galley, which was a lot fancier, which I'm sure Thomas had a chance to use. The way we did our meals was we would work together as a team, and if we were particularly good, our commander would reward us. But what's really neat in 0G is that you can eat your food in lots of different fun ways that you can't on the ground, as I will demonstrate here. But you have to be very careful and make sure there aren't other things floating around. Here you see Dave and getting ready to study fluid dynamics. You're not supposed to play with your food, but you can't help it on orbit. It's a lot of fun. A little bit Every astronaut and cosmonaut goes through extensive training on photography. We carry so many cameras on board, and it seems like the number gets more every day, and the same is true on board the International Space Station. So I want to share some great images from space. Every photographer wants to show you the great sunrise or sunset, and you never get tired of seeing them. And whenever you can stop in your work for just a moment to watch one. Also, I want to use this slide to remind me that you see a sunrise or a sunset every 45 minutes. It takes 90 minutes to circumnavigate the globe. This is a slide of the Aurora Borealis, the Mediterranean. I think many of you might recognize this as Israel with the Sea of Galilee, the Dead Sea, and the Red Sea at the lower portion. This picture was taken by Randy Bresnick, who was here last year. Some of you may have heard him talk. And another view looking over towards the Sinai Peninsula. One of my favorite memories on orbit was every night before we went to bed, we would spend about an hour just looking out the window. And one night I looked out, and we launched with a full moon. And there was a full moon, and it was dark, and I saw what I thought were clouds, but I looked over at the world map and realized I was over the snow-capped Himalayas. It was incredibly beautiful. This is the views in the daytime are wonderful, but it's the nighttime views that are just absolutely fantastic. You can see here the lights in Greece. These two cities, I've been going around to all my colleagues trying to figure out exactly what cities they are, but this is what cities look like in space. And one of my colleagues, Don Pettit, said that the city lights at night are an unintended, beautiful consequence of civilization. I didn't know that engineers were so poetic. And this is a view of Tokyo and the Tokyo Harbor. I'm sure you all recognize the Nile Delta with the looking up towards Israel as well in this slide. You can see on the right-hand side. This is Florida looking up the east coast of the United States. I always include this slide of Los Angeles because that's where I'm from originally. And I also include it because I've always marveled at the fact that you're looking down at this city with millions of people, and from space, you really can't tell very easily that is, that there's so many people living there. And then this is a view of the Kennedy Space Center with the two. Let's see if I can get this to work. Sorry about that. Anyway, you can see the two launch pads, the vertical assembly building, and the 15,000-foot runway that the shuttle lands on. And I use that slide also to remind myself to say that to go from the east coast, the west coast of the United States to the east coast takes 8 minutes, just to give you an idea, which is normally about a 5-hour flight. Finally, on the morning of the 8th day, was the day that you pack up. We had a very successful mission, a very demanding mission, and it was just really neat to have a wonderful day and talk to the President of the United States, take our crew pictures. On the morning of the 9th day, we did our deorbit burn, and we certainly hoped that the navigation officer targeted our burn accurately, because once you slow down, you're definitely coming back home, and you hope you're going to be landing at your intended designation. From the time of the deorbit burn to when you land is about 45 minutes. We landed at the Kennedy Space Center, and as I said, we were the first mission to ever bring back hardware in space. We were met by custom officials who asked if we had anything to declare. Finally, back in those days, we all got out and walked out of the shuttle, and even though it was just an 8-day mission, I felt like an 800-pound gorilla. I had some switches to throw on the overhead panel that normally took me 30 seconds in the simulator, and it probably took me several minutes to actually lift my hand up, make sure I was on the right switch, and you definitely feel very unsteady. My biggest fear was what you see, we're all holding on the handrail. My biggest fear was I was going to fall down, in front of all these people on camera. But luckily that didn't happen. And finally, we landed about 7:30 in the morning, And by about 2 or 3 in the afternoon, we were back in Houston at Ellington Air Force Base, and one of my happiest moments was being joined back with my little girl that I hadn't seen for over 2 weeks. And I always include a slide on my 2 daughters because everybody always asks about them. As you can see, they've grown quite a bit. In the interest of time, I have a section in here on training that I love to talk about, and I'm happy to answer questions later. So I'm just going to go through these slides. But I do want to remind, particularly for the young people in the audience, that there are lots of careers in the space industry and with the various space agencies. And training the flight controllers is just as equally important, and more importantly, training us to work together as a team. One of the things I love so much about working at NASA, and what many astronauts comment when they leave, is they miss that teamwork feeling. The flight director is always the person that's in charge of the mission, and the Capcom, which is also very good training, sits right next to the flight director so we can communicate easily. We also have a full-fledged mock-up of the International Space Station in one of our buildings. And we also have this pool where we train for spacewalks. And again, we can talk more about that, and Tomas knows a lot more about that than I do, having done one. And we also use it for emergency egress training. I will mention this slide, the means by which our pilots, there are 2 kinds of astronauts. There are pilot astronauts, who are selected, who join the military and get training as a pilot, and virtually every pilot astronaut has been to test pilot school. And so we have a fleet of T-38s that is used to maintain their proficiency as pilots. And then we also have mission specialists like me who have an advanced degree in any field really of science that you choose. I'm a medical doctor. And we have physicists, astronomers, oceanographers, sanitary engineers. So you can really pick any branch of science that you like. And the other value of our T-38 program is that everything else we do is in a simulator. And no matter how hard you try, you may embarrass yourself in a simulator by making mistakes, but you aren't going to kill yourself. And in a T-38, you can kill yourself. And having that real life experience, particularly for those of us who've never flown in a high-performance vehicle, and spacecraft are definitely that, it is valuable training. I'm going to just go through a little bit about the space station program because this is where we are now. The president has just announced that we're going to extend the space station to 2024, so we at least have another 10 years. And I would not be surprised if barring any major problem, that it could get extended further. People always ask me, what I like about being an astronaut. And when I look back at my career, although I love going into space, and it's absolutely a wonderful experience, I think I look back with real pride at when I was chief of our space station branch, because I got to be chief of our interaction with all the engineers around the world, and as the International Space Station was being developed, it was really interesting in the early days, working with our Russian colleagues, working with ESA, working with the Japanese Space Agency. I did not believe you could get people in a room that would argue over things like what was the standards for procedures, arguing whether to use a plus sign or a minus sign for something, whether you're going to have a period or a comma. It was really amazing to me. I felt that after that job, I could probably go in negotiate nuclear disarmament treatments because people treated it with that amount of professionalism. But I really enjoy the international aspects of the space station, and I really think that one of the biggest benefits, and although there are many scientific and other reasons for the space station that you've heard throughout this conference, I think the biggest reward is learning international cooperation. If anyone had told me when I was growing up in the 60s that I would be working cooperatively with the Russians, I would have thought they were crazy. And now one of my favorite memories was having dinner in Red Square, looking at the Kremlin with a good friend I had worked with, and seeing the same scene that I had seen on TV with tanks and soldiers marching by, that's where I think the real benefit of international cooperation is, and I hope we can bring more nations that we don't get along with, because I think when people start working together, they realize that we really are all the same. What I really like, so we started working on the space station in 1998. We launched the first 2 elements in November and December. Then there was that 2-year hiatus. We figured out how we were going to operate the station, and we launched the first crew in October of 2000. One thing I really love about also combining space programs is we learn from each other. And for the US program, when you went out to the launch site on launch morning, there was nobody there. It was quite spooky. And in the Russian system, people are there very close to launch, as you can see here. That's one aspect I really like a lot better. Here you see Sergei Krikalev, who's now head of training for the Russians in Star City. Then we launched the US laboratory. And you can see how pristine and clean it was. Believe me, when it was first opened on orbit, believe me, it does not look like that now. This is as we started outfitting it, and you'll see in a movie I'm showing you that it's even more crowded than that. Then we launched the arm, the big arm we called it, because with the shuttle arm we called it the little arm. But now that the shuttle's gone, we still call that the big arm. This is a view of the space station with the ESA module, Columbus, on your left, and the JAXA model on the right. We could really fly the space station in any orientation, but for many reasons we choose to fly it with this being the front of the space station, and that is node 2, which you heard Thomas talk about the different nodes, which are like the building blocks. That's where all the other modules and docking ports are. And that ring that you see in the center is where the space shuttle used to dock. This is inside node 2, looking across to the Japanese module. This is the back of the space station, or aft portion, with the service module and the FGB, which was the first piece, and you'll see that in the video, with a Soyuz docked on the aft end. And here you see the inside of the service module. This is where the crews gather at night to have dinner together, and you see a picture of Yuri Gagarin, who's a real hero in Russia. Exercising when you're in space for 6 months is really important. Our engineers developed this resistive exercise device, which simulates weightlifting here on Earth. We also have a treadmill, which you hook yourself down with tethers, and every crew is scheduled for 2 hours of exercise a day, which is a lot of time on board on the space station, but it is considered to be that important and has been very effective. The ISS crews there are 6 people. Each crew member has a sleep station. There are 4 in node 2. Each, you can see, they're kind of like little phone booth size sleep compartments, and then there are 2 compartments in the service module on the Russian segment. And the advantage of those is both of those sleep stations have windows. And then there's some other shots of the space station. Here on the upper left, you see the cupola, which is a favorite place for astronauts to gather. Here's the cupola from the outside. And from the inside, you can see there are 6 windows all around, and then 1 large window in the center. And the cupola was selected to be on a position where it always looks down at the Earth, and that's where we get all those wonderful pictures you see. And it's also where we operate the robotic arm, and can actually, if it's in the right position, see what you're doing without just using monitors. Now I'm going to give my voice a little break, and I'm going to show you a tour narrated by Butch Wilmore, one of my colleagues, who flew on board a shuttle mission, and is going to launch, I think, sometime next year to be on board the space station.
service module. Very aft into the Russian segment. See a lot of the gear, the computers, cameras on the walls. We'll continue forward now. Our next stop will be the first juncture in the Russian segment, where we'll look down first into the docking compartment, and you see a progress cargo transfer there at the bottom. If you look up now, you'll see the brand new Russian segment, the MRM-2, the science module. Got a little bit of gear packed in it for the transit uphill, and they're starting to put it into work now. We're going to turn around, Jeff's taking the lead, and we're in the FGB. A lot of cargo stored in the FGB. A lot of stuff. There's food, storage, some scientific material, stuff behind the walls, of course stuff on the floor here, little mirror here, place where you can clean up, take a bath. And now we're in the next juncture where we look down into the other Soyuz that is attached. It's a very juncture between the FGB and Node 1. Jeff's backing up now into Node 1. Through some more storage area in this PMA1, this mating adapter. And now we open up into Node 1. You can see Roman here. He's working on A-Red.
And this is me.
And we'll turn around the other way. You can see Randy, Bobby, and Mike working, doing some EMU drink pit.
They're in an airlock getting ready for a spacewalk.
Continuing into the lab. Say hi, Frank. Hello, Sir Commander. Hi, Sis Commander. Hello. Frank DeWin. Robotics workstations. See, this basically a bicycle. Station potty.
Okay, Swanee, I'm with you on page 2, right? And
Coming on through.
as well.
Well, there's Bob first.
Seeing move.
In the flesh. Sitting here in Node 2.
Bobby's column.
Coming up Node 2, of course, a connection for various parts of the station. We'll look this way into Columbus. You can see the station spacewalking suits, the EMUs, are stashed there on the ceiling. Some more storage on the floor. Japanese experimental module, the GEM, with another sleep station on the floor, other things stored here and there. A working laboratory. Come on, we're into the shuttle now, through the primary mating adapter. Making the 90-degree turn. Now we're on the middeck. There's our commander, Charlie Hallmark, Bill George. And now we're continuing up to the flight deck. See the flight deck? Commander seat, pilot seat. We got a couple of seats removed here in the back that we'll have for entry. And then we'll look out the overhead window at station. We certainly hope you've enjoyed your tour from Soyuz to shuttle. Thanks for all the great work everybody's doing on the ground supporting us. Thank you.
I hope that gives you a little feel of just how much fun it is to be in space and how large the International Space Station is. I see that my time is up, so I'm going to try to go real quickly. With the end of the Space Shuttle program, which ended with 135, after 135 missions, here's one of the last shots of the orbiter on the pad. The only capability we currently have for launching humans into space is the Russian Soyuz. And here you see a picture of a launch, but one of the things that I so admire about our Russian colleagues is their hardware may not look as fancy or be as complex as some of the US hardware, but it is really hardy. And here you see 2 years ago, they were just getting ready to launch in a blizzard, and they did. They launched successfully, and everybody's safe. Just a bit about the crew that's on board and how we rotate. The Soyuz, unlike the shuttle, can only hold 3 people. So like this was the Expedition 37, and you see Karen Nyberg on the left and her crewmates, and they just very recently left the space station. So for a week or two, there's 3 people on board the station until the next crew launch. I would also add that Karen is also a mother and had a 3-year-old son and was, away for 3 months, and I'd be happy to talk about that later if you're interested. And you already saw this slide coming up. Then the next crew launches after about 3 weeks or so, and then we go back to a 6-person crew that you already saw, and Expedition 38 is the current crew. As the Soyuz crew gets ready to depart the space station, this is what it looks like inside. You can see that the Soyuz is a much tighter volume than the shuttle. They have a single parachute system, unlike the Orion I'm going to show you in a second, which we have 3 parachutes, but it has worked beautifully. And then landing on the ground, and although you wish them a soft landing, everybody that comes back says the landing in the Soyuz is like a controlled car crash. And finally, again, our Russian colleagues have always taken their long-duration crew members out in these little portable seats because they understand how difficult it is when you first get back. Very, very quickly, where the US program is headed next, we're in the middle of designing the Orion vehicle. And after many studies, they decided to go back to a capsule very similar to the Apollo capsule, just a little bigger. It is capable of carrying 6 people, but we're really only designing it to carry 4. And its purpose is to go beyond low Earth orbit, to the moon, to an asteroid, whatever our politicians finally decide. And here you see the Orion taken apart, and as Thomas said, it's going to be an international cooperative effort with ESA. We're having the Orion module being built in the United States, and the service module, which contains the propulsion and all the other life support equipment, is being designed by ESA. The advantage of a capsule is that you have a launch abort system, which is the rocket thing you see on the right side of the slide, and you can eject, you can hit a button either on the ground or in the cockpit to abort right off the pad, and it will take you up. You experience a lot of G's for that, but your chances of living through a catastrophe are much better. This is a mock-up. Unlike the Russian program, we've elected to land in the ocean, and we'll be landing, hopefully, if everything is nominal, off the coast of California near San Diego. And here you see a test in the neutral buoyancy lab. I've been working on the designs of the displays for the Orion vehicle, and here you see us in the cockpit doing one of our tests. And hopefully this vehicle will be ready to go to the moon, or eventually modified perhaps to go to Mars. And then finally, I'm just going to briefly talk and show you, we are trying to develop a capability for taking humans to the International Space Station. Again, Orion is not being designed to go to the space station, and we've had several projects to do that. Right now, we have 3 in competition. The SpaceX Dragon, which I'm sure you've heard about. They have already launched cargo successfully, so I'm sure they will be successful in launching humans as well. And then we have Sierra Nevada's Dream Chaser, which is like a little space shuttle. And Boeing is also developing a capsule, and they're in the middle now of deciding which of these, how many will go forward. And they also are developing with their launch system. Finally, I just want to mention briefly about we stand on the shoulders of those that went before us. In virtually every building at the Space Center, we have pictures of the Apollo 1 crew, the Challenger crew, and the Columbia crew, because we want to remember our colleagues who perished doing what we all love, and also want to learn from any mistakes we may have made. And I want to conclude with this slide, particularly for the young people in the audience. My grandmother passed away a few years ago at the age of 105. She was born in 1898, saw the horse and buggy days, saw the development of the automobile, the development of early aviation, commercial aviation, and finally saw her granddaughter fly into space. I cannot conceive that much change. You know, it just boggles my mind sometimes. And I cannot imagine what the young people in this audience, if they are fortunate enough to live 100 years or more, what you're going to see. The rate at which technology is changing is absolutely amazing. Maybe one of you in this room will be the one to go to Mars. With that, I will conclude. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, and I would like to invite the other two astronauts to the stage for a short question and answers. Okay, so we all heard that it's great to be in space. This is the next thing, to sit with three space explorers. I have several questions that I prepared, and because of the time limitation, I doubt that there will be a possibility to hear from the audience. Sorry for that. I'll start with you, Thomas. In the past, there were several plans to build a European manned spacecraft, beginning with space shuttle Hermes from France, and then capsules to be launched on board the Ariane 5. If we put the financial issue aside, why did Europe decided again not to move on with this?
Well, it's we cannot put the financial aspect aside, because that was exactly the reason. As you mentioned, the Hermes program included the development of the Ariane 5 launch. We have heard this morning a presentation from a member from Arianespace who was talking a little bit about the evolution. And the Ariane 5, the launcher, was actually developed for as a human-rated launcher. Of course, then when the Hermes program was stopped, certain aspects of making that human-rated were also stopped. But the step would have been not a big one, to say. And we had an attempt actually in 2008 to take this path, to get it human-rated, to start with a capsule that can re-enter. I mentioned before that the ATV unfortunately burns up in the atmosphere at re-entry, like the Russian Progress. So it would have been really a comparatively small step from technology-wise, but at the end, money was playing the main role, and that was the reason why we didn't take this decision. Also a little bit in view that there were, on the US side, the commercial transport systems under development. We have on the Russian side the Soyuz, which is an extremely reliable launcher. I mean, more than 1,800 launches of this system, I think, speak for themselves. We have now in China human-rated launchers. So the decision of our member states was really to focus on other areas of technology that contribute to such cooperative efforts. And with this example I gave with a cooperation in MPCV, this is one of the ideas. At the end, I have to say, I would be really happy if maybe sometimes in future we can bring that discussion up, but for the moment, it is really a financial, political issue at the moment.
Thank you. Dumitru, when you flew in space, you flew as a guest of the Soviet Union because it was part of the Intercosmos program. Did you feel that the Soviets are treating those astronauts or cosmonauts as equals to them? Did you got any responsibility to operate the spacecraft, or you just flew to space to conduct some experiments and so on?
Say a few words about my own experience. When I arrived in Star City, I was 25 years old. I was pretty young. I looked like a high school guy, and even they asked me in the beginning, "Hey, did you graduate from the high school?" Then they notice that I'm an aerospace engineer, and then I know a lot of theory. I know by heart all the equations, even more than they teach us there. But in the beginning, when I succeeded to learn very good Russian, I passed all the exams with the maximum codes. And then they've seen that, okay, not only the Russians are very good, but also the international crews could be very, very well prepared. I was in the crew with Evgeny Hrunov in the beginning, was a Russian who then was, by different reasons, dismissed from the detachment of astronauts, of cosmonauts. And then for about 2 months, I trained myself in the simulator, just alone, without any partner. And then I took the place of the commander, I took the place of the flight engineer, and I had to give all the orders, all the commands by myself. So I learned a lot about the role of the commander in that time. And when I flew into space, I have my role as a flight engineer besides the research cosmonaut. And I did all operations, all necessary operations as the second half of the crew.
Okay, thank you. Another question to Anna, after your long talk, I hope to hear it. You were the first, you were part of the first group of female astronauts in the United States back in the class of 1978. Could you please elaborate a little bit about the attitude from the NASA people, the old guys, astronauts, especially veterans of Apollo and so on?
Experienced. I'll answer that one. I just want to thank both of my colleagues. I so rarely get to listen to other astronauts talk, and I learned so much from both of you, so thank you. I was very privileged to be in the first group of women selected for the U.S. program. I will have to say that we were so welcomed at NASA. They went out of their way to make sure that we felt welcome and were ready to receive us. About the only difference that my male colleagues talked about was all the questions we got and all the interviews, because everyone always wanted to take pictures of us. I think I actually encountered more isolation in my earlier career in chemistry and also in medical school. In medical school, at the time, we had 150 students, and only about 15 in my class were women. And so when I came to NASA, it was actually, we were actually treated very nicely. They assigned us various roles and gave us a lot of opportunities to succeed. I was assigned to work on the development of the extra small spacesuit. So they made a commitment to try to get the smaller women to be able to do spacewalks. It turned out that that was more difficult to do than we imagined, but they made the commitment to try. And after a long period of time, they finally decided that they would only use people who fit in the medium and the large spacesuits. But I felt, we certainly felt internally the pressure that every astronaut feels to do well. We all want to do our job well. There's a lot of time and money invested in our training. And so, and as a woman, we certainly felt the pressure to do well, to set the pathway for the women coming after us. And I was really proud when Sally Ride passed away last year. We had a memorial for her, and several of the women wanted all the women astronauts to get together. And so I arranged a dinner at a local restaurant, and there were about 27 of the 50 or so women astronauts there, so a very good attendance. And there was one from every single group, at least one woman from every group, and we went around the room at dinner, and we started with the 78 class, and I said a few things, and we went around till finally we came to the class that was most recently selected, the 2009 class. And one female astronaut, who shall go unnamed, stood up and said, "Well, I was born in 1978. If looks could kill, she would not be here." But what was very interesting, and Karen Nyberg, who I just showed you in the picture of the Expedition 37 crew, said that she had wanted to be an astronaut since she was 5 years old, and she had seen pictures and things of us, and that it never even entered her mind that she could be an astronaut. And so it was a real privilege.
Do you have a little tip for the female students here, how to become an astronaut?
The tip I would give to anyone wanting to be an astronaut is that first you have to decide that you want to do something that you love anyway, because getting to be an astronaut is very difficult. And you can get disqualified for things beyond your control for medical reasons. There are a lot of medical reasons why you could not be selected. So, you know, decide if you want to be a pilot, decide if you want to be a mission specialist, and then just be the very best that you can. At the moment, having an advanced degree, I think, is probably helpful, and MD or PhD for the mission specialist. And then for the next 10 years, sorry, learn Russian. It's a real advantage if you know Russian when you come in, and possibly Chinese, and if you want to be really increase your chances, learn both. I don't think I have enough brain cells to learn both.
Good. Another question to Thomas. You have a vast experience in various space vehicles, from Soyuz to Mir, ISS, and the space shuttle. And you very well familiar with the training process of both Russia and the US. And what did you take to the European Astronaut Center from both countries? They are both coming from a different culture, not only in the daily life, but also technological. For a small example, one used inches, another millimeters and centimeters. But the technological aspect to space is very different. So what did you take, and how do you combine them to one European space program?
This is a very, very interesting question you are asking. Of course, it's not the case that we have looked on both sides and then we had the idea how to do it. But in all those previous missions, there were colleagues involved from the training division of the European Space Agency, and they followed the training when my colleagues and myself were going through the training for flights to the Mir station. They were closely following. And I have to say, I mean, that was a different time, and I'm sure Dimitriou can also acknowledge and tell stories about that. I mean, we did not have any handouts. We had booklets, and we need to write down. I mean, the instructors were in the front, they were writing to the blackboards or dictating, and all we had to learn is what we were writing down. Now, today things are a little bit more easy, so you have handouts, you have a lot of electronic means on your laptop, training programs, and all this fancy stuff. So that has evolved in the time. And as our training people were involved in that, they learned a lot while we were with NASA in training, on the Russian side in training. And I think they have now a very solid training for getting crews ready for Columbus, because each of those ISS partners is training the international astronauts for their modules. So for example, in JAXA, the astronauts are trained in Japan for the Japanese module, in Cologne in the European Astronaut Center for ATV and for Columbus, in Canada for the Canadarm, for the robotic arm, and of course in NASA and Johnson Space Center. And that has been standardized now to a certain extent. And again, as Anne said, this is really a fantastic development, that this has become now very international. Not only the crews working on orbit, but all the engineers, the training engineers, the technical personnel in the control centers. There has been some kind of standardization that helps really in this international context to grow together and to achieve goals together.
Okay. I want to ask a more of a philosophical question, or a more personal question to all of you. I'll start with Dimitriou. When you returned, you landed, of course, in the Soviet Union. And then Brezhnev awarded you the title Hero of the Soviet Union, and of course Ceausescu did the same with the Hero of Romania. And being a part of an Eastern European country at that time, you got a huge reception in your country, and you became an instant national hero. But after a month, after a year or 2 years or 10 years, how did your space experience change your life?
Actually, we had in Romania quite maybe strange experience with Ceausescu in that time, because the Ceausescu, you know, all of you, was a dictator. And the propaganda people around him kept him as a single hero of Romania. Was no place for another hero. So 1 month after I came from the space flight, I came together with a crew, with a Russian team that visited Romania, was received by Ceausescu, were given the titles and so on. Then the television and the newspapers show us and show what we did and so on. After the Russian delegation left, they didn't show anything about me, about my space flight, about anything connected with me personally. And I was told after '89, after all this regime change, by a person, an old person working at the television, that they got an order from the central committee of the party, don't show any more Prunariu, because he could put in a shadow the image of Ceausescu. Not competing for the president or for the leader or for anything, but just the people were already of Ceausescu. They didn't support anymore his image, his presence on TV, in the newspapers, anywhere, only he was. And they wanted a new hero. And I represented a young guy, not involved politically, who could become a hero of Romania. Of course, I had a lot of meetings in different institutions, schools and so on. They received me at the highest level. And it showed me as well the fact that didn't support anymore Ceausescu, but wanted something else, wanted a change in Romania. And the change came in '89. So after '89, free. I'm invited to televisions, not every week, but every 2 weeks, every month, newspapers, news about space, comments about what happened in the world. I had my own international positions, and I had a lot of comments to make concerning the international environment connected with space and so on. This is the situation now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anna, we saw the picture of you and your daughter after you landed with the space shuttle and arrived to Houston. How was the first few days on Earth? Because I've met several times with astronaut Jeff Hoffman, yes. And he said that he broke a lot of coffee mugs because he just left them and saw on the floor of the kitchen the remains. So how was it to get back to gravity? And of course, Thomas, you have much more long duration space flights. So what was the feeling? And on the emotion, was it some kind of jubilation or a little bit sadness not to go to space?
Well, as you got ready to leave space, you know, you realized how fortunate you were to be there. You didn't know for sure if you would ever, you know, get another chance to come back. And so it's a very bittersweet thing. You're sad to leave this wonderful environment, but it is a very isolating environment. Even now with the International Space Station, where they have internet accessibility and they have phones and they have private conferences with their families once a week. There's still something, I heard there was an interview that 2 of my colleagues did on Orbit where they talked about that isolation. And back in the early days, it was even more so. So you miss the Earth. You miss feeling the wind on your face. You miss the smells. And most of all, you miss your family. And so the slightly over 2 weeks that I was gone was probably the longest time I've ever been away from my daughter until she left for college. So coming back was, you know, just a wonderful feeling to see her. Coming back from an 8-day mission, it took probably about a day or two to adapt. I remember I didn't drop any coffee mugs, but you were kind of, my biggest fear when we first got back, the thing you really want is a hot shower, because you haven't been able to shower. And back then, Now they're a little more careful. They put you in a room by yourself so you could change and take a shower. My biggest fear was I was going to fall over in the shower and hurt myself after having been in space for 8 days because there was nobody there. But that goes away pretty quickly. And the other thing I remember is the first night I went to sleep, I kept feeling like my legs were floating up. But again, you wake up and you look and you realize, no, they're not. Darn. But you adapt pretty quickly. The crews that have been up there longer, and Thomas could sure talk about that more than I can, but I've watched many crews come back. And we have a very excellent rehab program now where we slowly get people to exercise and get back to normal. But I would say they recover about 10 days or so for most things, but the recovery for the bone loss and the muscle mass and those kinds of things take up to 6 months and even longer.
Thomas, I will rephrase my question to you because you were in space several times. So how was the feeling entering the space station or to go into orbit for the second time because you knew what is going to happen?
Well, even though there were 11 years in between, I found it amazing that somehow the body remembers. The first time I was flying to the Russian space station Mir, you need some time just to adapt to weightlessness. You are using much too much force when you want to move around because this is how you used to move around here on Earth. So you are pushing away from a table or from the wall, and with much too much force. Then you are moving very quickly, and of course on the other side you have the problem to stop again without taking anything. You saw the pictures from the interior ripping off the wall. So after a couple of days you adapt to that and you realize that you need just very, very little force. I mean, you tip with your finger on the wall and you nicely float away, and it's just perfect. Now, this adaptation phase was not needed on the second mission, even though it was 10 years or 11 years in between. The body somehow, not consciously, but unconsciously remembers that. And there is another effect that I observed is the first days in weightlessness, your coordinate system is still referenced to up and down, the way how the labels are written. So whenever you are floating around, you are orienting yourself to the floor, to the, let's say, the constructionally determined floor. And then after a couple of days, somehow this coordinate system is going away, and it doesn't make any difference if you are working on the ceiling, on the wall, or whatever, upside down, whatever that means. And also this phase was much shorter and almost instantaneous. When I came from the shuttle into the station, it just felt very familiar, despite the fact that the Mir was still a little bit less spacey inside compared to the ISS, but it felt almost like coming back home.
Okay, with that, we conclude this session, and I want to thank all three of you, Dumitru, Anna, and Thomas, for sharing us the experience.
Thank you. אפשר לשים אור באולם בבקשה? טוב. זה מאוחר, ורוב העולם, בעיקר הילדים, כבר הלכו. בבת אחת הם קמו לפני משהו כמו חצי שעה, קיבלו הוראה מהמורה, קמו ויצאו להם. אז אני מסכם בעצם את היומיים האלה, ותרשו לי להתייחס לשלוש נקודות בקצרה. I am talking in Hebrew because we will meet again upstairs for a farewell ceremony. So then I'll speak with you. אי אפשר לפי דעתי היה לסיים את הכנס הזה בדבר יותר מתאים מאשר האירוע, הפאנל שהיה לנו פה עם האסטרונאוטים, שהיה מלבב, מלמד וסוגר בעצם את כל הפערים שאולי היו לנו בכל ההרצאות האחרות, אבל כולם היו מאוד מאוד מעניינות והוגשו בטוב טעם. אני רוצה להתייחס לדבר שעלה פה, ושעלה לאורך כל היום הזה, החל מיום רביעי בערב שעשינו את אירוע הפתיחה, וזה הבינלאומיות. כתוב פה, הכנס הבינלאומי. ומתברר שכשאנשים עושים יחד דברים באירוע בינלאומי, גם אם בעיקר הוא מתמשך, אז כל מיני הבדלים בין עמים ובין שבטים ובין קבוצות ומשפחות וחמולות נעלמים ויוצא החלק הטוב של רוח האדם. ואני מאוד שמח כל פעם שאני נפגש בזה, וזה לא הפעם היחידה שנפגשתי, הייתי שותף באירועים מעבר לים, והדבר הזה הוא תמיד מעורר תקווה. הדברים הלא טובים שאנחנו מוצאים הם בדרך כלל קשורים לא לאדם הפשוט, אלא להנהגה שבראשו, וככה נוצרו את כל מיני אל-קאידות, ואנחנו סובלים מהם, ואני מקווה שדברים, אני בן אדם אופטימי מאוד, ומהטבע, ואני מאמין שדברים בעתיד גם יסתדרו, חבל שלא את הכל אנחנו נראה. בקשר לילדים, אני משתף אתכם, הם הלכו, ורציתי לדבר איתם מכאן, כי הלכתי לדבר איתם במהלך היומיים האלה, באזור שלהם, בתערוכה ועל הדשא, והם העתיד. אנחנו כאן בחדר, כאן זה פחות אולי ההווה, ורובנו גם אני לפחות העבר, וזה מאוד מלבב לראות את הילדים האלה, את ההתעניינות שלהם ובמה הם עוסקים, ואני רק זוכר שהייתי ילד, לא היה טלפונים פה בארץ, והיום יש את זה, כן? אז זה מראה בהרבה תחומים, זה דוגמה אחת רק, החל בכלי טייס ובכלי קשר וכל מיני דברים אחרים. אז אנה התייחסה לעובדה הזאת, ואני חושב שבשנת 2050 והלאה, אני כבר כנראה לא אהיה, הם יראו פלאים גדולים מאוד, ואני מאחל להם את זה, ושהעולם רק יהיה יותר טוב. לגבי הכנס עצמו, הרבה מאוד מחשבה הושקעה פה, הרבה אנשים עבדו על הבמה, מאחורי הקלעים, למעלה, במנהלות ובהכל, ואני פשוט, זה היה לתפארת מדינת ישראל, ואני בפניכם רוצה להודות לכולם, לכל מי שעזר ותמך, וכולל בתמיכות מבחוץ ובכסף, וגם תמיכות אחרות, ואפשר לנו להרים את הכנס הזה, שהוא כבר שנה תשיעית, והוא רק הולך ומשתפר, והתכנון והביצוע הוא דבר די קשה, אני עוקב מבחוץ, אני לא בכל דבר יכול להיות שותף, והיצירתיות פה וההנהגה היא קשורה למנכ"ל שלנו, אסף אגמון, וברשותכם אנחנו נריע לו, אני מאוד מודה לו. תודה רבה. מי מכם שישתתף מחר בעלייה לקברו של אילן רמון, אז אנחנו ניפגש שם, ומי שלא, שיזכור אותו בלב, תראו בכל התמונות כמה הוא היה שמח, והוא בבת אחת נכחד, ואנחנו זוכרים אותו, והוא בלב, והיה איש נפלא, עם משפחה מופלאה, וצער לנו, זה מאוד מצער שככה זה נגמר, לפחות הוא לא יודע שזה קרה לו, אני חושב. זהו, אז שניפגש בשנה הבאה, בכנס דומה, ובעוד הרבה כנסים בעתיד. תודה רבה לכם. ערב נפלא.